AJ, we're live, bro. Thanks for coming on and doing another show. What's going on?
What's up, Steve? Glad to be doing this with you. Different time, different format here. We're doing the Draftkings and looking forward to breaking it down with you for 251 here on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely. And let's get right into this. Let's not waste any time. Let's just tell everybody what we want to do. So we want to go through all the fights, kind of letting you know who we're considering for cash games and GPPs. Are you more of a cash game player or GPP guy yourself?
I do both. Yeah.
Okay.
How about you?
I would say I'm more of a cash guy, but as I'm gonna reveal my projections this week, I've already tweeted them out, and again, I'm gonna tweak them throughout the week. I'm thinking I'm gonna mass enter something. I don't know if I'm gonna do like a 20 or a 150 to try to see how the projections work out. I kind of want I want to mass enter to see how it looks. But I'll see what happens. I'll see what happens. And again, I have projections that I put on the website. I'll bring them up at some point on the show. And then if anybody wants to, if you want to generate lineups, you're gonna have to go to a site that allows you to generate lineups based on these projections. So I think Roto Grinders, AJ, correct me if I'm wrong, but Roto Grinders, you need a subscription in order to put in projections or to see their projections. Is that correct?
That sounds right. I'm not familiar with that myself, but that sounds to be correct to my knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you can change I think you can generate lineups based on percentages, but you can't do anything, change projections or see projections unless you have a subscription. Fantasy Cruncher, I know, is another site that does that. And then again, some of the bigger sites may have options where you can actually optimize lineups on their site. But you would have to know that if you have a subscription. I don't have that, so I'm not really sure. But I'm just throwing out projections if anybody wants to see it. And I actually did throw my projections through an optimizer, and I will give you the lineup, the highest scoring lineup that I got based on my projections towards the end of the show. So I'll do that. So AJ, let's get right into this. And we're on DraftKings here. The first fight is Davey Grant and Martin Day. And since you're the guest, I'll let you do the honors. Who do you like here? Cash, GPP?
This is a fight that honestly I don't think I'm going to end up with much exposure to. Haven't exactly made lineups yet, but it's just like an opportunity cost thing for me. Like, could one of these guys blow up the slate? Sure. I mean, we've seen some stuff throughout the history of DraftKings MMA that, especially guys in the mid-range that are lower owned, just completely blow up. Day, the rationale for playing him would be hopefully he gets a knockout. Perhaps he lands, 100 plus significant strikes like he did against Lou. I mean, Grant has never been stopped via strikes, but Bermudez did hurt him prior to the stoppage. So I don't think it's that big of a reach that day with him being the athletic guy that he is, has some power, that he could hurt Grant. I wouldn't really play. I don't think Day is like a priority for me. And again, the rationale, just to reiterate, would be that he gets a knockout. I just don't see him wrestling here. And Grant is a bit more viable in my estimation because he's cheaper, and I do think that he could land takedowns here if he wins, the win scenario for him. So like cash versus GPP, I don't think this is a priority for me in cash. It'd be more of a GPP fight, if anything. So basically the rationale for playing it for me would be if Grant wins, he could land some takedowns and wins at a low ownership. If Day wins, hoping for a knockout at a low ownership. So just a little bit of GPP for me. How about you?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I put it up to Martin Day when you talked about the striking, and I do like Martin Day as a play here. Right now, he's not in that optimal lineup, I don't think. Let me just check before I say that. No, he isn't. The lineup that I created on my own, kind of just thinking maybe see how much I get correct with the optimal lineup based on points and what lineup I would normally play. I didn't have Day in there either, but I think he's a nice GPP play because I think he can knock out what's his name? Davey Grant here. I think he can finish this fight. I think he's a high volume striker. He's a very good striker. So I do like him in this case. So I'm gonna say, yeah, I would go with him if I could. And then again, when it comes to Davey Grant, I'm going to fade him. So in my projections, I actually click a column GPP and cash, I'm definitely not playing Davey Grant in cash. I think there's a lot better plays. I'm not very high on Davey Grant as a fighter at all. I think Martin Day is going to win this fight. I can see it being a striking fight for 3 rounds if Davey Grant can hang in there with him. I can see Day winning this fight by knockout, TKO. So that's kind of where I'm looking with this one. But let's go into this next fight. I actually have a bet on this fight. So AJ, Melo and Rosa, what do you think here?
Yeah, I guess the big talking point here, first things first, would just be the fact that Rosa just put up so many points in her debut there. And I know we talked about it before about how the numbers perhaps a bit inflated, but despite 126 points in her debut performance, I still think she's going to be low owned just based off who's priced around her. Volkanovski, Jan, Hibas, Usman is cheaper. I just don't see many people clicking Rosa's name unless if they're mass entering lineups. So, and as we see, she put up 125 in her debut. That's really solid. Maybe she doesn't get that quite high of strikes, but as we talked about it in our breakdown show, there is a bit more potential for her to wrestle here, I think. So she could make up for it with those takedown points. I'll have some Rosa. I do think she's viable, especially for the low ownership, and especially because she could score well in a win scenario, even in a decision. Melo is fine as well. I don't think she's like a priority underdog for me, but just like we talked about before, Prosopio put up a big score against Rosa despite a loss. So if we got Melo here at 7K and these two women are, like we said before, kind of just standing in the middle of the octagon, trading, landing a bunch of volume, we're not expecting a finish here. They're both durable. So Melo, even in a loss, I think she's got like a safe floor. So cash versus GPP, I do think that each woman is cash viable, not a cash priority. Again, I think the main event fighters are obviously the more glaring objects in that sense, but two women that I could see scoring sufficiently, even in a decision scenario. So this fight, between this one and the previous one we just talked about, and even the one after this, I do think is more viable for me in those circumstances. How about you? Any interest here?
Well, again, going back to our breakdown show, I do like Melo, and I have a bet on Melo. So I think she's a great play at 7K. And again, I don't want to rehash everything I said in the breakdown show, but Rosa could win this fight somewhat easily if she just takes Melo down. The thing with Melo is she's going to walk forward and she's going to strike. In her previous fight, yes, she was taken down, put on her back. I believe that was in round 3, and she couldn't get up. So if that happens again, then yeah, I'm completely wrong with Melo. But I like the way that Melo marches forward. I think if this stays on the feet, which it could, based on the previous fight that Rosa fought and Melo fought for the most part, most of that fight, I think that they can score pretty well. Overall, I wouldn't mind playing either one of these girls in GPPs. I'm going to stay away from them in cash. Right now, I didn't play Melo in cash, although I wouldn't put it. I wouldn't say I don't want to play her at all, but there's just other guys around there that I know it's going to stay striking, so they're going to score better. You know what I mean? Even on a loss. So with all that being said, I think the best point that you just made is in terms of selection, right? She's going to go overlooked, Rosa, because she's 9.2K, and you have a bunch of fighters in that range that are in 5-round fights. So if Rosa is able to get this down to the ground early and work her BJJ, right? She's a black belt on the ground, I believe.
She's brown or black belt, yeah.
Is okay. So she's a high belt on the ground. So if she can work her BJJ and get a first or second round sub, she can definitely pay off 9.2K. So I think it's a sneaky play in GPPs, maybe more of a low owned play. So I agree with you there. And again, I think just to add a little bit to what you said, I think the reason you're right about that is because of the other higher priced fighters in 5-round fights around her. And then you also have Amanda Rivas, who everyone thinks is going to destroy Paige Van Zandt. So AJ, let's get into this next one here. And this is Paiva and Zhumagulov. Who do you like here in this fight?
This fight, I just think it's going to stay standing where it most likely goes to decision. I faded Paiva last fight on DraftKings, and it burned me because he was at a low ownership and he knocked De La Rosa out. So I make a bunch of lineups, so I'll end up with a little bit of him. I just think, again, he's just pretty reliant on getting the knockout to pay off. He is a solid – he is a good grappler, but his game is to strike, so I'm not expecting him to take the newcomer here, Zaydas, I believe is how you pronounce his name, or Zhalgas, excuse me. So Zhalgas is a pretty solid grappler himself. So the rationale for playing Paiva is that maybe he gets a knockout. He strikes in volume, yeah, but for 8,700, we would need like a ton of it, like say a couple extra rounds. So like in that sense, he's not a play that I'm prioritizing. Zhalgas, I think, is okay. He's a live underdog. It should stay standing. So like his floor is higher in that sense than say some other fighters that could be taken down, be put on their back. So again, he's like viable in that sense. Again, a live underdog that can win a striking based decision, but just kind of like Paiva, I just don't see him finishing the fight. I don't see him landing takedowns. So it's kind of like I think each fighter's upside is capped at, maybe they get 90 points in like the best case scenario where it's not a knockout, but just not a fight that I'm super intrigued with. How about you? Do you like anything here?
Yeah, well, again, I'm in that position where I did bet on this fight. So when I consider this from a betting standpoint, I do like Zhalgas, Zhumagulov. I put a bet on him already. I think that he's going to be able to limit the striking in this fight and basically score and get out of harm's way. I think it was kind of where I went with my breakdown. And then if you look at Paiva's scoring here, we see against Kai Kara-France, he only scored 37 points. And that was a fight that he very easily could have won on the judges' scorecards. But even with a win there, right, add a 30-point bonus for a win on DraftKings, you're looking at 67 points, and that was a striking fight. Bontorin, obviously, he got cut in the first round, so throw that one out there. Then against De La Rosa, he was actually losing the striking battle, scored 107 points with, I believe it was a second-round knockout. But he was losing the striking battle, and he didn't take the lead in strikes until that knockout punch. So with all that being said, I think Paiva's a GPP play, if anything, if you want to play him low on GPP, because if he does get the finish, obviously if he scores 107 points and gets a second-round knockout, that's a good score. You know what I mean? I would take that any day of the week. But I think you're right. I think it's going to go to decision. And I think a lot of the reason it's going to go to decision is because of the way that Zhalgas fights. He's in and out of the pocket. He looks to score. He could go for a takedown. I would like to see him go for a takedown, although Paiva's BJJ is pretty good. Just to score on DraftKings, try to win rounds. And I like the price on Zhumagulov. I don't necessarily know that he's going to score very well if he loses. All right, so in a cash game, I think there are better scores there. But in a GPP, I wouldn't mind playing either one. And Zhumagulov, I kind of like a little bit to get the win, but I don't like him to finish Paiva. So again, he may not even score very well. AJ, this next fight is Tybura, and this is gonna DraftKings hasn't updated this. I guess they were so concerned with updating the main event they forgot about this one. But Romanov is out of this fight. This is going to be Maxim Grishan. So in my projections, I kind of projected him, since this is kind of a pick'em fight right now, that he would probably be like 8.1, 8.2K. So would you consider either of these guys, considering Grisham's probably going to be at 8.1, 8.2 when they throw him in there?
I would, yeah. Just going back to our point about the preview show, just very briefly, is I do think that Grisham here can win by knockout. I'm just, again, not so sold that Tybura is as durable as he once was. Maybe he is, but when I go back on tape and I see Sakai hurt him with the first clean punch that lands, it's like, okay, maybe there's something to it. I hope I'm wrong with that, but this Maxim guy is a good striker. Again, we talked about the size. Tybura will have the size advantage. He's a big guy for heavyweight standards, so he's going to likely try to clinch up with this gentleman, take him down, maybe get a sub. So Tybura at 7,900, I will have some exposure to him. He's going to have some odds value. I don't think he'll be that popular despite that reason. Just because if you look at his historically how he's scored. He just doesn't typically score well in wins. But for me, like the physicality and grappling upside has me intrigued with him to some extent. And again, I do like Maxim a bit for that knockout upside. Even though he is a light heavyweight, I do think he's a solid striker, probably the better striker. I think we'll have a speed advantage as well. Maybe he gets tired and Tybura takes advantage of it down the stretch. But this is a fight where, I could see a couple different scenarios happening where the winner could put up a big score. And what should be a low ownership, I'm going to have definitely some exposure to both sides here. How about you?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head here. I think Grishan was live as to finish. So if you're looking for someone in the GPP, he could finish this. But again, he normally fights at light heavyweight, right? He's coming in here at heavyweight. So I would like to see where he weighs in. I'm not saying that if he weighs in at 215, he can't knock Tybura out at 240, 245. I'm not saying that can't happen. I'm just saying I think there's more likelihood that Tybura uses that weight advantage to push him up against the cage, slow the fight down, try to grapple him down. Definitely do a lot of work in the clinch, which Tybura is known for too. So again, I'm not sold on this is going to finish. But again, I think that there's plenty of opportunity to play both sides of this. Tybura, again, he doesn't score well, and I brought it up in the middle of your breakdown. But if you look at those wins, 71 points in a win versus Spivak. He had 2 takedowns, 3 advances, and then against Struve, 85 points. Again, it's not terrible. It's not a terrible score, but do you want to spend that much money when you have some guys, in the 7K range, guys and girls in the 7K range that could get a finish, like an Andrade or, if Holloway, is able to finish a fight or something like that. So, you gotta decide where you want to spend your money. I think this is going to be a low-owned fight overall. But again, we don't even have the true price right now. I guess when it comes in, I'll reconsider. But right now, for the most part, I'm probably going to stay away from this in both cash and GPPs. Even if I play 20 lineups, I probably will have no Tybura, maybe a little bit, maybe 1 or 2 lineups with Grishan. So let's go to this next fight, Santos and Bogatov. I feel like this is the biggest wild card on this card, just from the fact that we don't know what Santos is going to look like at 40 years old, hasn't fought in a year and a half, 2 years. Bogatov obviously is making his debut here. This finishes, it could break the slate. Either one of these guys could be, on that winning lineup. I really have no confidence in this fight. This is probably my least confident fight from a betting or Draftkings perspective. So AJ, help everybody out here. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you. Santos has come through in the past, just looking at his scores, he's a finisher, he's a grappler, and that's enticing for DraftKings in that sense. But I'm still sticking to my read in that Bogatov's probably the better wrestler here, better cardio as well. So I think Santos kind of has like a limited opportunity here to finish. Like we said, it's possible. He does have a very heavy right hand, good counter striking, but then again, when we're talking about what we talked about earlier with opportunity costs, we got Usman right above him. We've got fighters even cheaper than him, Oezdemir, Amirkhani, that we haven't gotten to yet, that to me have a bit more likelihood of hitting their upside. Whereas Santos, it's like, yeah, sure, he could get the knockout, but then again, he just strikes at such a low rate, and Bogatov's never been knocked out. And I understand Bogatov's never fought at the UFC level, so there's always a chance that maybe he's just not ready, but that's not really what my read tells me, is that Bogatov looks pretty solid. So again, I would just like to reiterate, I am a multiple lineup type of guy, so I will have a little bit of Santos, but again, he's kind of the same play to me as Paiva, in that they're both priced similarly, and I just think that their path of hitting 100+ points or a viable score for their salary is limited in tournaments. So for cash, it's pretty much just a pass for me. Bogatov, kind of what we said about Zhalgas, like he's a live underdog. I think the way he wins though is like a striking based decision. Again, we talked about the question marks on Santos. This gentleman is like 10 years younger. I didn't notice like a significant like speed advantage that will be in Bogatov's favor or anything like that. So he's like an okay underdog for me, but this is, again, just not a fight that I think is worth a lot of DraftKings exposure in my estimation for my portfolio on DraftKings. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. It's really a matter of how you read this fight and how you read Santos, in my opinion. So even if you look at Santos and you look at his striking, against Martins, the one fight that went to decision, he only had 23 significant strikes. Against Lee in a fight that he knocked him out, he had 32 significant strikes. And then against Stevie Ray, he had 12 significant strikes when he knocked him down and knocked them out. So again, his big scores were the finishes. So I think this is a GPP fight. I don't think it's a cash fight. And again, his last 4 fights, the one that went to decision only scored 42 DraftKings points. You get 30 points for the win. You know what I mean? So, I don't know what we're going to see from him here. It's going to be difficult. So again, I would say GPP both ways. Bogatov, I think he's ready for this. I mean, he was the M1 champ, right? So he's coming in with a pretty decent, pedigree outside of the UFC. And again, it's going to be a lot closer for him to get there, travel there. I mean, looking at the accommodations, that all the journalists and fighters are tweeting out and stuff, it's not the best accommodations. They've had to stay in that room for 2 days once they got there and stuff. But, for the most part, I think that favors Bogatov. I don't think that favors Santos at all. And I'm assuming he's going to have to cut more weight in addition to that. So that's my read. That's my take on this one. And for the most part, maybe a couple of GPP plays. I do like Bogatov, though. I think Bogatov is a guy who at 7.4K is live. Amirkhani and Danny Henry. AJ, what do you think here? I think there's only one way I'm playing this. I'll start off this one since I'm pretty confident in it, but I think Amirkhani is the only way for me to play this fight. I think I'm going to fade Danny Henry. I'm not going to play him at all in GPPs. Again, talking 20 lineups, I'll probably play Amirkhani in like 3 or 4 of them. I like his price at 8.6K. I think he can finish Danny Henry. Amirkhani, again, is a guy who he likes to flash. He has a knack for the flashy finishes. He's strong in all positions. And again, I think Danny Henry, as far as I'm concerned, the Tamor fight, I wasn't very impressed with. The Dawadu fight, obviously it's impressive, but he caught him with a shot. And again, I don't think it was a skill-based thing. And then against Dan Ige, if you go back and watch, AJ and I earlier in the week, like he didn't even want to exchange with Ige. Ige kind of hurt him early. I don't know what was going on in that fight, but if you watch the Ige fight, I just think that Amirkhani is the play here. Betting standpoint and GPP standpoint. So I'm on a fade on Danny Henry. What do you think here, AJ?
So Amirkhani, yeah, he's pretty clearly the better play for me on DraftKings. He's technically got some odds value. His odds are stronger than some fighters that are priced above him. We might even see them increase as fight time comes along because, like we talked about before, he's just simply put the better fighter here. So for 8.6K, I do think he'll be kind of sneaky because, people – I've noticed the historical performances on DraftKings of fighters have impact on the ownership. And it makes sense. People see a fighter that has scored big in the past when they've won and they want to target them. And so even if they're coming out on a losing streak, like a Tim Elliott, for instance. So the thing with Amirkhani is I'm looking at his wins here, Fishgold 86 points, Knight 65, but those are like matchup based. Like Fishgold is a black belt. Knight, I don't know what his BJJ rank is, but he's got a very good guard. But this matchup's different for me because I just, like we talked about before, I just think Amirkhani is the much craftier, much more threatening submission grappler. So if he gets in top position on Henry here, I just think he could pass his guard and just choke him out. I mean, relatively early in the fight. So for 8,600, I do like Amirkhani's upside at what should be, maybe he doesn't come in at like 15% ownership, but, if he fell below 30%, I wouldn't be that surprised, to be honest with you. So I will definitely have some Amirkhani. He's my preferred play of the two. Henry interests me a little bit because if I'm doing an if-then scenario in my head, and I've been doing this more in recent cards, and I find it that it's helping me. Like if I do if then, so unlike Zhalgas and Bogatov, where I think if they win, it's probably a striking based decision, which is fine. I mean, obviously, if you get a win for that price, that's solid. But if Henry beats Amirkhani, I think he has to pretty much do it by finish. I mean, maybe it just so happens where it's like the Timur fight where he's losing early, Amirkhani gets tired, and then he kind of just picks up and just kind of does a lot of damage over the course of the rest of the fight. Henry's okay for me. I mean, he's not, again, a priority underdog for me, but again, I am a multiple lineup type of guy, and this fight is one of the ones more likely to end in a finish. So I'll have exposure to both guys, but again, I would like to reiterate my preferred play is Makwan here, because I think he should roll on paper.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point against when Danny Henry fought Timur, right? Timur is notorious for coming out hard in the first round, like first 2-3 minutes, kind of blowing his gas tank, and then he doesn't have anything to really respond later in fights. So I think Danny Henry was able to capitalize on that in that fight, like a lot of other people have. AJ, I'm going to throw this next fight to you first because I know you're so excited about it. I am too. I mean, if you're a fight fan and if you watch any tape and Zaleski and Salikhov is going to be a hell of a fight. I mean, and I said it, if anything's going to steal fight of the night from one of I think the Volkan fight could be fight of the night. This could be fight of the night. Or like the three main fights will probably have the best possibility of being fight of the night. This is the fight, right? This is the one where these two guys can last for 2 or 3 rounds, and you're going to see spinning back fists. You're going to see kicks from all angles, the capoeira on full display. I mean, it's going to be exciting, AJ. So how are you playing this in DraftKings?
Yeah, so it should be one where I do expect this to be one of the more popular fights. But like I would like to reiterate to everybody that reaches out about questions like these and just kind of say it in general is like ownership on DraftKings doesn't discourage me. Like I'm of the mind where like if you like a play, then just play them basically. Like, I mean, we have 6 roster spots in our lineups to be contrarian. I mean, you don't have to like be sneaky in every single lineup spot. So like, yeah, while I don't think this fight will be like an all-in fight for everybody, I do think people will target it. But that said, I do think it's viable. Like Santos, we know what he's capable of. Yeah, like you said, like capoeira, he likes to stand and bang. But in a matchup like this, it would make the most sense for him to take it to the ground and try and submit Salikhov. Now, I have my own questions as to whether or not he could do it. I lean that his wrestling isn't good enough for him to just go out there and just try and take him down. Even looking at on tape, Garcia take down Salikhov. Garcia, no longer with the UFC, but a big physical guy, really had to work for those takedowns. But at the same time, we've seen in fights like Julian Rosa versus Sean Woodson, like, sometimes fights just happen to make their way to the ground, or sometimes a fighter just gets tired as the fight progresses, and that increases the fighter's chances with the better cardio of getting the fight to the ground. And I do tend to think that Zaleski has the better cardio here. So if he gets this fight to the ground and he's in top position, I think he will submit Salikhov. Again, black belt versus blue belt. Only 3 wins by submission does Zaleski, but I just think that the submission grappling disparity here is wide. And I do think he could get the sub. Maybe he even wins by knockout. I mean, I was even thinking about the Sean Strickland knockout. I mean, that was pretty crazy considering Strickland's never been knocked out, a defensively sound striker. So I wouldn't put it past the Santos to even win by knockout. So I'm approaching this fight like I could target DeSantos. He could win by sub. He could win by knockout. Even if he wins a striking-based decision by out-voluming Salikhov, I think he's fine. Salikhov, I think, is more reliant on getting a knockout to pay off. I don't think his volume is high enough, even for 82 to pay off in a decision. He got like 77 last time against Staropoli. I'm just not expecting him to land takedowns again. So it's pretty much just a knockout. He could do it. DeSantos was rocked by Max Griffin a couple times. He was obviously hurt by Li Jingliang, so it's possible. Like we said, Salikhov is just so excellent striking wise. I think we'll have a speed advantage as well. Just a sharper striker. So I do think that he's viable, and I'll have exposure to both fighters here. How about you? Do you think it's a good fight to target both ways?
Yeah, I do. And again, this is the kind of fight where, depending on what you're doing and how many lineups you have, you can easily go 50-50 or 40-60 because of the price. It's so close. Just pick your poison. Obviously, you're going to eliminate a couple lineups just because of what's the difference? 2,000 or 200 price difference. So that 200 price difference may eliminate a few lineups. But any lineup you make with Salikhov in it, you could obviously just eat the 200 and throw Zaleski in it. I would play both. I do like your take on Zaleski. I actually favor Zaleski in this fight. Like if I'm picking a winner, I'm picking Zaleski. I'm not betting it. I'm not that confident. I just want to watch this fight as a fight fan. But when it comes to DraftKings, I think Zaleski does offer the takedown upside. He did, choke out Curtis Millender. I think that can happen. I think he's a as good, if not a better, striker. But again, both of these guys are dynamic strikers, so there could be a flash knockout at any time. So I think you got to play. I think this will be you want to be contrarian, don't play this fight, because I think this is going to be a very popular fight, one way or the other, especially the way that it's priced. Everyone can kind of see that both these guys have the chance to knock each other out. So if you want to be contrarian, yeah, don't play this fight. But again, that's risky in amongst itself. But I favor Zaleski. I'll probably have a little bit more Zaleski in my lineups. AJ, let's get into this next fight. This is going to be Volkan Oezdemir and Jiri Prochazka. I'm not very good with that name. But Volkan Oezdemir I already have a play here. I think 8.4K is a great price for Volkan. So again, I'm going to have a lot of Volkan, and I probably will not be successful making money on this card if Volkan does not win. I'm going to have a lot of Usman. I'm going to have a lot of Volkan. Those are the two guys I'm going to have a lot of in GPPs. And Volkan is in the cash lineup that I created. I'll share those lineups at the end. But the cash lineup I created, not the optimizer, he's in that lineup. So AJ, what do you see for this one?
Yeah, it's kind of the Amirkhani versus Henry fight, just kind of in a different iteration. Oezdemir, I think, is pretty clearly the better DraftKings play for me. Yeah, I mean, I like him to win, just like you. I just think that, on DraftKings, he's pretty knockout or bust. We talked about before, how he can potentially get some grappling going here just because of the improvements that he's making. And Jiri has definitely looked shaky on the ground at times, just looking at his footage in Ryzen, some recent fights. So for 8.4K, even though Oezdemir has shown that, while in a decision scenario, he doesn't score well. I mean, my rationale is just targeting him for upside. I mean, that's why I play tournaments. I just kind of map out the best case scenario for why I'm playing each fighter, and then I play them based on that probability. So I do think for 8,400, Oezdemir could really break the slate if he gets the knockout here, or even potentially a submission. So he's the play I like of the two. Jiri, again, he is a finisher, but again, just like we said before, he just hasn't been tested at the UFC level yet. Yeah, he's looked good in some Ryzen fights. Yes, he's a good athlete. He's fast. But is he going to be the first guy to knock out Oezdemir? Not like a ground and pound stoppage. I mean, again, possible, yes, but I just lean no. I tend to favor durability, especially when Oezdemir's been in there with guys like Reyes and Rakic. So, yeah, it's pretty much like Oezdemir or pass. It's a light heavyweight fight, and these guys are big, and Jiri is powerful. But I more so see a decision scenario materializing for Jiri if he were to win. But yeah, just not to get away from the fact that I do think Oezdemir is a solid play, and I will have exposure to him. So should be a fun fight and a telling one to see exactly where Jiri is at.
Yeah, and again, you talk about strength of schedule, right? You got OSP, you got Serkinov, you got Manoa, you got Daniel Cormier. And then you go up, and he had Anthony Smith, who fought for the title. So Cormier had the title. Smith fought for the title. Reyes fought for the title. And we could even argue that he beat Reyes, and then Reyes beat John Jones, if you wanted to. Alir Latifi, who was on a hell of a run, He finished him, and then Rakic, whoever it was, everybody's darling, thought that he was going to be the next guy, and Volkan beat him. I mean, that's a hell of a resume right there. Now, again, I don't want to say MMA math is anything here, and there's not really much MMA math because this guy's making his debut, but he hasn't fought the level of competition that Volkan has, and as you keep saying, Volkan's never been knocked out. He's been finished in the ground twice, right? Cormier and Anthony Smith, but he hasn't been knocked out. So I don't see that happening here. I can see Volkan winning early. I can see either guy winning a decision late. Is more or less what I see here. I think if it gets into round 3, they'll both kind of try to win round 3 in a striking battle. But that's more or less what I see here. But I like Volkan a lot. It may not score well, but by the same token, if he wins a 3-round decision, is he going to get 62 points like against Rakic? It's possible. It's possible. So yeah, I don't know about the scoring here. Now that you mentioned that, I may have to reconsider. But going into this, yeah, I definitely thought that I would be playing more Volkan, just based on that. So let's get into this next fight, Paige Van Zant and Ribas. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Ribas is an easy play in cash. She's an easy play in GPP. You may want to limit your exposure in GPP, just because you don't know how this is gonna score, and I think it's also going to be very popular. If it's an early finish, first or second round, I think Ribas scores well, whether it's knockout or submission. If it goes to the scorecards, you're really at Draftkings scores. You have no idea how this is going to be scored. There's probably going to be a lot of strikes, and if they say they're significant, like that previous Karol Rosa fight that we mentioned earlier, then yeah, it could score a ton. I'm not going to necessarily bank on that, but Ribas is very good. She's very good. I think she can finish this. She did sub Whitmire. I think she could finish by a knockout. She's a good striker. But again, even if you throw up some of her previous fights, she hasn't scored. If you're getting someone at 9.5K, I don't think she's going to score much more than these numbers right here. So there's no reason to be all in on her in GPP. In my opinion, I won't be. I actually like a couple of the other fighters that I think will strike more. But for the most part, yeah, I think it's Ribas, and I'm a total fade on Paige Van Zant myself. That's completely up to you. I don't know how often you fade fights, but I'm a total fade on Paige in this. AJ, what do you think?
Yeah, I echo a lot of what you said there. I mean, it's just to your point. I like to plant my flag on fights where I'm very confident in one side, and I don't think it's viable to play the other. Like, I'm much more willing to target both sides where I'm confident that the fight as a whole will score well, the winner of the fight, but I'm not super confident as to who wins. So maybe like Santos versus Salikhov would be like a solid example of that on this card, or maybe even like Pichota versus Barrio from a couple weeks ago. But yeah, this one, it's pretty much as Ribas or pass. I mean, she's the biggest favorite on the card. Like you said, I think she's cash viable. Like I think she does finish this fight. I just think she's the much better submission grappler. She will be popular to your point, so that would be a reason to think about the ownership that's in GPPs. I think she's cash viable. Though there are some other ways you could potentially go in cash, because again, we've got Jan, Usman, and Volkanovski there that have 2 extra rounds. So it's kind of just an opportunity cost thing from the perspective of the DK player. So I'll have some Ribas, and yeah, I'll just keep it short and sweet like you. It's just pretty much Ribas or pass. If Paige wins, then good for her. Just process oriented wise, I'd rather just play Ribas.
So AJ, we go into this next fight, and I'm going to start with this. Are you on Rose to win this fight, or are you on Andrade?
I prefer the dog here, Andrade.
To win, or as a DraftKings play?
Both.
Okay, so I do also. but I hear, and again, I listen to the Anakin Florian podcast. I go back and forth with Ian Parker on DMs and stuff, and he's on Rose. And whenever he's on someone that I feel like I have a clear view on the fight, it takes me back a sec. What am I missing here? And I think maybe the big cage is something that could factor in here. Maybe give Rose the opportunity to fight that perfect fight. Again, it's only 3 rounds, but can she fight that perfect fight, stay away from Andrade, from the clinch, stay out of harm's way? I don't think Rose is going to invite the clinch work, is going to invite the grappling exchange. I think she's going to try to win rounds on the feet. But again, how is that going to score? You know what I mean? And that's my concern with this fight and with Rose. So I'll throw the numbers up there. Rose has scored well when she's finished. In Jacek fight and in the Waterson fight. But this was a 5-round fight where it was mostly striking. In the rematch with Joanna, and it only scored 88 points in 5 rounds. So is that the fight that she's going to look to fight here? Because I feel like that's what it's going to look like. I feel like Rose is going to try to keep her distance, and fight the perfect decision type fight. And if that's the case in 3 rounds, I don't think it's going to score well, even if she wins a 3-round decision. I don't think she finishes Andrade unless Andrade gets her to exchange in the pocket, which I think would be crazy. On Rosa's half, I don't think it's crazy on Andrade's half. I think it's crazy on Rosa's part. But I think the preferred DraftKings play for me is Andrade. I'm considering a full fade on Rose. So, AJ, what do you think here?
Yeah, I think the rationale for playing Rose would be like hoping she could get the knockout possible. I don't think Rose is like an outright bad play for DK. I'd prefer her over Santos. I prefer her over Paiva if I'm picking one of those 3. So if I'm just weighing opportunity costs, I would think that, she could win by knockout. I think that's one of the more likely scenarios if Rose wins is by knockout. I just think that, like you said, she needs to stay away from Andrade enough and finish the fight, or just basically, again, be fast and have good enough cardio to do that for stretches and win rounds. Andrade, to me, is clearly going to have the better of those exchanges in close range. She could land power, like she's shown to have in her hands, or she could out-wrestle Rose. I think it's pretty clear that she's the better wrestler here. So, and then also, again, I would just like to reiterate, like, I know intangibles aren't everything in this game, but when we're looking at, Rose contemplating walking away, and we also look at the fact that, even though Rose did win the first round, Andrade still did win the first fight. So what does that really do? I would think of the 2 women just based on those bits of information. Like Andrade would probably feel better coming into this fight, at least until the lead up here for the majority of the time. So, and you got her scores right here. I mean, Andrade always scores well when she wins, even in decisions. I mean, yeah, even Torres, like that was the decision, and the fights after that were the finishes, and she scored way more points there. We know what she's capable of. Yeah, she could go out there, land several takedowns. She could land several significant strikes. And for 7,200, I think she's going to break the slate if she wins. So I think she's viable in all formats. I know we got to get to some other fighters here later, but she, of the 2, is my preferred play, especially for the discount. And again, Rose is just more so reliant on getting the knockout to pay off. Like if she wins the decision, that'll be okay, but I just don't see how she would top. Like if we're saying Andrade wins the decision versus Rose and we're comparing the prices, I just think points per dollar, Andrade is the better play.
AJ, I agree with you. And again, I think the most important thing that people need to understand, and again, I know there's about a dozen people watching live right now, so if anyone has any questions, by all means, throw them in the comments. We'll put them on screen. We'll answer your questions. I think the thing is, I'm considering a full fade on Rose. I'm considering using my projections to do 20 lineups and a full fade. You got to make your own decision. I'm not telling anybody what to do. This is just my take. Obviously, AJ's giving his take. but there are a couple fighters that I know I'm fading. Probably five fighters off the top of my head that I'm pretty sure I'm fading with 20 lineups. If I made 150 lineups, I don't think I would fade anyone, to be honest with you. But maybe one or two lineups, even if there's 150 in some of these. I actually may fade Page, even if I was doing 150. I really don't think it's a great play. This next fight is Peter Yan and Jose Aldo. And again, the next three fights, you have to really consider throwing these fights in cash. Every one of them, whether you like the dog or you like the favorite, just because you're getting 5 rounds out of it. So some of these favorites, if they finish early, someone like Usman, who at 8.9K is a great price. Holloway, Volkanovski, I think if you were gonna, and we'll go into the prices there, but if you're gonna, stack any fight, I think that's the fight to stack. And then you have Yan and Aldo here. And the thing that I think is gonna happen is I think these guys are gonna come out cautious. So I'll throw Yan's, DK scores up there. Everybody goes to decision for the most part with John Dodson, so 80 points isn't bad. Rivera, another fight. Look at the significant strikes. I mean, he knocked him down twice, 86 points. And again, for the most part, Rivera was doing fine on the feet. He just doesn't have the power that Yan has, or obviously that Aldo doesn't have. Aldo has more power than Rivera. But you go to the Faber fight, and that finished in the 3rd round. But Yan kind of beat him everywhere. You know what I mean? And it took 3 knockdowns, 2 takedowns to get to 115 points in a 3-round fight. Yan is patient. He's a very patient fighter. He looks for his shots, especially early in the fight. So I don't think this is a slam dunk DraftKings play. You don't have to play this fight, especially if you think Yan's going to win the fight. But again, you also have to consider these are all 3-round fights. So now you're getting 5 rounds out of Yan. If he's able to have success over 5 rounds and win the fight, the striking total isn't going to be 80. That striking total is probably going to be, 115 in a 5-round fight, maybe 110. So with that number of strikes, maybe he gets a takedown, maybe he gets a knockdown. I don't think he's going to get a takedown specifically. I think this is going to play out on the feet. So I think if anything, there'll be a knockdown if this goes to the ground at all. And again, Yan is live for that knockdown. So you have some different ways that you can play this fight. And that's more or less how I'll be playing it. But for the most part, I think you play both. If you're doing 20 lineups, I think maybe Yan you do. I would consider maybe 6 or 7, maybe Aldo 2 or 3. It's not my favorite play. I can see other fights scoring better, especially in these price ranges. So AJ, what do you think here?
Yeah, I think we're on the same page here because it's like, to your point, I mean, Yan, if he wins this fight, it's nice that he has an extra 2 rounds to work with here. But I could see a scenario where like he wins a decision and like doesn't hurt Aldo, like he doesn't knock Aldo down, and then he gets like 90 points, which is okay for 9,300. But is that going to make the optimal GPP winning lineup? I don't know. Again, we've got Ribas, and there's a lot of other fighters that should be lower owned and less expensive than Yan that could potentially outscore him. So I'm not saying he's not a bad player or anything like that. I'm personally saying like I'm not going to be super heavy on Yan, because I can see, I just can't see a scenario where like he just maybe even doesn't win. Like I think just by looking at social media here, and I know it's not everything, and I see the betting line moving a certain way, and that's people are starting to bet Aldo now, but I'm more of the mind where like I'm not as confident as say others are in Yan. I do think that if he doesn't hurt Aldo and like put him away, I think Aldo probably beats him. As bold as that may sound, I just think that Aldo is the better technical striker, better defense. Aldo 6,900. Like even if he wins a decision, that's fine. Like I'll take that if it works out. I'm sure anybody will take that. So cash game GPPs, I think Aldo is viable, especially because he's just so darn cheap and his odds are getting better. So I'll definitely have some Aldo. I'll also have some Yan too. I do think that Yan is also in play for cash and GPPs. Again, he's got a good finish prop. I don't want to get away from the point that he still can finish Yan. Like I can see it happening. That is probably the most likely thing. What happens is that he goes out there and hurts Aldo and finishes him. So it's a fight where, like, yeah, I'm not as sold as say others are on Jan just, doing this in flying colors, which he still can. But one that I do think he still probably passes, but I'm not going to count Aldo out because, just to reiterate and hammer home the point, I do think he's alive here. And if he doesn't get hurt and Jan doesn't put him away, I tend to think Aldo's just going to be a bit better than him over the course of 5 rounds and potentially even hurt Jan along the way. So it's a fight again, another viable main event 5-round or title 5-round fight that is viable on DK.
So the one thing that I'm going to push back on you a little bit is, are you concerned with Aldo's gas tank? Because again, in the fights against Holloway, don't get me wrong, high volume striking. Both guys went after it. He faded rounds 2 at the end of round 2, and then in the first one it was into round 3. Where Holloway put him away, and then Marlon Moraes, right? He looked strong against Marlon, but Marlon did have the better blows in round 3. What is round 4 and 5 going to look like versus Jan?
I think you bring up a good point. Yeah, I do think that his ability to pressure is very good, and I'm thinking about the John Dodson fight where Dodson actually dropped him, but then Jan still won the round because he pressured Dodson, like walked him down and was landing that volume. So while he doesn't bring that same sort of like volume heavy style that Holloway brings, I think he could just kind of pressure Aldo, wear him down. Yeah, the gas tank of Aldo does concern me, especially with another drop down in weight to 135. Now he's got to shed an extra pound. So that is definitely something I've considered. Though I am still optimistic that his cardio is decent here because it looked decent against Moraes. So I see where you're going with that. Yeah, like Jan could just kind of earn a stoppage by just kind of wearing on Aldo and winning by TKO in either rounds 4 or 5, something like that. So I could see that scenario materializing as well.
Yeah, and I just threw up my projections for the first time. I'll talk about them a little bit at the end, but you did mention something earlier that sticks out. Jose Aldo implied finishing probability is 20%. So I did notice that, and for a dog, he has a pretty good implied finishing probability. These are my projections. They're available on the website. I'll throw them up from time to time here as we finish off the pod. But by the same token, yeah, I think that as the fight goes on, I think Jan is going to be able to wear him down, and it's going to be interesting to see who takes the center of the octagon. You know what I mean? Jan is so used to just kind of stalking and moving forward and putting that pressure on you just by being in your face, and that's what Aldo likes to do. You know what I mean? So who's going to take the step back? Personally, I think that Jan is gonna come after him and make Aldo take the step back. If he doesn't, then it could be over early if they're going to exchange like that, in the center of the octagon. So depends on game plans, I believe, at that point. So our next fight is Volkanovski and Holloway. And again, AJ, I'll let you start off here. The thing that I just want to bring everybody's attention to is how many points were scored in that last fight. So if you look at Volkanovski, because again, this is a rematch, 5-round decision, he scored 109 points. All right. If you go to Holloway, look at his points, you're looking at 67 points. All right, 134 significant strikes. So I have no problem, a little over 170 points. I have no problem stacking this fight. So this is more or less the cash lineup I put together. I have no problem stacking those two guys in this cash lineup in Usman. That was my original cash lineup that I put together before I used the projections. Now, with that being said, yeah, I'm going to make some tweaks to this. We already talked about Oezdemir, how he doesn't always score well, especially in decisions. I just talked about Jan. I may have talked myself out of Jan. I'm even more on Andrade, to be honest with you, at this point. I like the stack, and Usman, I think, in cash is a great play. So I may remove those two guys from my cash lineup. But for the most part, I think that this is a great fight to stack. I think it's a great fight for GPPs. I think they're both going to score very well. And even in a GPP, if you play Holloway in a GPP and he doesn't win the fight, he's still going to score a decent total if it goes to decisions, 67. So you may not win the tournament, but you're probably going to cash with Holloway in your lineup. So it depends on how you want to play your GPPs. So, AJ, what do you think here?
we got a question in here. The gentleman named Matthew is asking for some locks here. I don't know that there are any locks for 251, but so anyway, yeah, to this fight, we have, yeah, like you said, the first fight yielded a big score for both the winner and the loser. And for that reason, I like your take on that this is cash viable. Both fighters are. I mean, even if Holloway loses again, we know Max is just so durable, lands so many significant strikes. Like even for 7,100, if he gets even 60 points again, he gets a little bit less. Like that's fine for cash games because, no matter the narratives on Volkanovski finishing in this time, I still just tend to favor durability of fighters. Like Max rarely gets hurt. So can it happen? Sure. But I just think that Max probably goes the full way again. And for that reason, he could get some points. Now, obviously, if he wins, that'll be the best case scenario. And that's why that would be the main objective for me to target him is I'm hoping that he wins at that point, at that price. Even in a decision, if he gets 90 plus points for 7,100, I think that's great. That might even be on the optimal lineup, depending on how the rest of the slate shakes out. Volkanovski again, yeah. If he gets over 100 points again, even for 9,100, I think that's viable. So yeah, I just think again to hammer home the point I made earlier, this fight will be very popular, but make no mistake, don't let that discourage you if you're a Draftkings player. I would just play the fighters that you like that have that are in your DK fighter pool that you really objectively like and think will score well. And this is a fight for me where like, yeah, they'll probably both be, 30, 40% owned, maybe more. But that said, it's hard for me to not think that the winner of this fight will put up a big score. So I will be heavy on it. Of the two, I think they're both fine for DraftKings. I mean, I'm picking Volk to win, but at the same token, they're $2,000 apart. So there's discount at Max in that sense. So like them both, I'll have exposure to both. Again, GPP cash. I think it's just a good fight to target all around.
Yeah, and AJ, I wanna answer Matthew's question here, and I'll give him my locks. I think that the people I have in this lineup right now, from my opinion, are locks for my cash lineup. So I have 4 figured out. I may, based on what I said earlier, I may want to go with Rebus. So if I do go with Rebus there, I think that's fine. Then I got to find somebody for 82. I'll see how that looks. Maybe I'll go with Zaleski. But again, I think that fight can end early. Now the other person that I probably would consider if it isn't Rebus in cash would probably be, where is he? Amirkhani. I think I would go Amirkhani in cash, and that would leave me with 9.1, which if I'm tailoring this lineup right now, I don't love Rosa. I don't love Santos. You know what I mean? Like it kind of leaves me in no man's land because I don't love those guys for cash. I don't know. Maybe Martin Day. Maybe go Martin Day here. That doesn't look like a terrible cash lineup, but I'd have to work that out and kind of solidify, my thoughts on that. So, Martin, I just wanted to give you a more complete answer, and that's more or less what it looks like. So, I'll share the screen with you. So if I did that, it would more or less be this with Amirkhani and who's the other guy I said? Day. Probably be Amirkhani and Day. I just don't like where it puts me if I go Rebus. All right, but again. Play around with your lineup. That's what I'm looking at for cash. In GPPs, I'm going to be very heavy on Usman, so we can segue right into this main event. For the most part, I'm going to be very heavy on Usman here. I think that Usman is going to score well. I don't think there's much for us to be concerned with in this fight. I hear people, talking about the obvious. Everyone loves Masvidal, right? A lot of people aren't big fans of Usman. So a lot of people don't want to play Usman because they're not big fans of him. And I may even fall into that category. All right? I'm a bigger fan of Masvidal than I am for Usman. But the reality is this fight is not a good stylistic fight for Masvidal if he can't keep it on the feet. So if Usman takes him down continuously, I just don't see how Usman isn't going to score well and he isn't going to win this fight, whether it be with a late finish or a decision. I just keep coming back to that. So again, I've heard. Last night I stayed up. I did some tape study. I watched, Usman. I watched Masvidal on tape. I also went and watched like all the shows, all the interviews. I watched Brett Okamoto interview. I watched Daniel Cormier and Ariel Helwani. They kind of talked about it. Ariel introduced. I don't know if you saw that interview, but Ariel introduced the main event, and then Daniel basically talks about. I guess Usman FaceTimed him, so he gave a little bit of insight into their conversation. I know Masvidal and Usman were basically planning for each other all along. Definitely in Masvidal's case, he was training for this. He claims he was training for this. I don't see the same training with the same intensity, to be honest with you, because you don't know if you're going to fight. I can see training, but the intensity of the training, the entire fight camp, I don't see that part. Now, with the other token, you know that Usman wasn't in his normal training camp, but he was training in Denver, right? So if you factor in that cardio boost that he's inevitably going to have in this fight, I think that he brings Masvidal down early in this fight, first, second round, and I think that he's home free with just winning rounds the rest of this way. Maybe he gets a late finish. It's a pretty straightforward take for me. I think that Usman is a GPP target. I'll throw that ticker on the bottom. I think Usman is a cash game. There is no way that I'm going to reconsider and not have Usman on my cash lineup. He is 100% going to be in my cash lineup. And again, in GPPs, I think I'm going to go, if I'm making 20 lineups, I'm probably going 16, 17 lineups with Usman. I mean, I'm that confident in Usman in this fight. So, AJ, tell me anything that you disagree with. I think we agree entirely too much, but if you disagree, let me know.
Yeah, the only things I would like to add were this would just be a spot where like recency bias can sway some people. And I've been guilty of it in the past too. Like we see Masvidal, the tear that he's been on, incredible. Only got a knockout Darren Till. The win over Nate Diaz was very impressive. It was a doctor stoppage, but Nate's so hard to hurt. But that said, I had to go back to his fight against Damian Maia. That was the last time where somebody really wanted to get him to the ground. That the fight played out for multiple minutes, that is. And Masvidal got tired there. He is a good defensive wrestler in general, but Usman, we know, just nonstop cardio. Like you said, the Denver thing could perhaps help it even more. Guy went out there, landed over 10 takedowns against Rafael dos Anjos, who's a good wrestler in his own right. Like, Masvidal, like you said, he needs to, I think, win this fight by knockout to win. It's possible. I'm not going to put it past them. Assuming we're getting the best version of both fighters, though, it should be Usman here. I like your take on him. Yeah, I think he's viable for cash, for GPP. Masvidal's going to actually be somebody that I'm going to take an underweight stance on because I do think he's going to be popular because, like you said, people like him. I like him. But I like to separate my bias as a fan from an investment perspective because I just tend to think that helps me and others in the long run. So can Masvidal win? Sure. But like you said, this is just a tough stylistic match for him. Usman presents the better round-winning tools. And Usman always scores well on DraftKings, not to bury the lead on that. But, yeah, even against Covington, a fight where that was just striking. I'm not necessarily expecting him to knock Jorge out. Jorge's got a great chin. But even if he wins a decision, I could project him for a few takedowns. Maybe he gets 8 takedowns, a few advances, 100-plus significant strikes. For 8,900, that's great. So I will have Usman. He's my preferred play in this matchup. Masvidal, again, he's like a secondary underdog for me, just not somebody I'm going to go out of my way to target.
AJ, over under 4 takedowns. Usman gets 4 takedowns in this fight. What do you think?
Over.
Yeah, I say over too. And again, if you're saying over, then you're Usman's going to win the fight. He gets 4 takedowns, he's winning this fight. You know what I mean? Even if you go back to this stat here against Woodley, 2 takedowns but 7 advances. That's a pretty good, ratio for someone who is known, Woodley, for his wrestling. Dos Anjos, 12 takedowns, 7 advances. Again, against Maia, he didn't want to take the fight down, and against Covington, since they're both wrestlers, I think
he was Steve.
Did I lose you?
There we go. Okay, we're back.
Oh, okay. I may have knocked out and came back. So I don't know how much you missed. I heard you say and then I don't know how much you missed, but against Woodley, right? Woodley's a great wrestler, and he had 2 takedowns and 7 advances against Woodley. And then again here we have 12 takedowns against Los Angeles, 7 advances. In the fights that he didn't want to take down, Maya and Covington, there were no takedowns. But does he want to take this fight down? I would say yes. I would say he wants to take this fight to the ground, and that's where he's going to wind up scoring his points on DraftKings and doing his damage. So again, that's where my head's at with this card. The one thing that I do want to bring to the table, and I told everybody I would do this at the end. AJ, I'm sorry, you got to hang out for this for a minute, but I just wanted to give everybody, this is the cash lineup based on my projections, and the optimal lineup based on these projections. So again, my projections are here. They're available on the website. AJ did a breakdown for the main event that'll be on the website. I don't want to put him on the spot. I don't know if he's contributing anything else this week. He has his own content that he does on his own, so he can plug himself right after this. But these are my projections as of last night. I will be updating these. I didn't have any inside the distance lines for Usman and Masvidal when I looked last night. I didn't even look this morning. And then again, we don't have an actual price on Grishan yet, right? This hasn't updated yet on DraftKings, but this is the lineup right here that those projections created. Now, personally, I'm not a big fan of this lineup. I wouldn't play Melo and Cash. I already told you my concerns about Ribas and Oezdemir. So I will be updating my projections, but I don't necessarily mind Zhalgas in cash. I do like Amirkhani myself, so I may even play that in cash. So that's more or less where my head is at. And again, it's all going to be full transparency. It's all going to be on the website. AJ, you want to just plug yourself? Let everybody know what else you got going on this week and what you're providing on your site.
Yeah, so subscribing to the content that I provide, that would be my bets, a detailed written breakdown for every single fight on this card, pros and cons, including the main events. Also an audio breakdown that is well over an hour where I go super in depth on each fight on the card. You will also have access to my consulting. Basically, you'll just be able to reach out to me, call me, text me, email me, any questions, any clarification. I understand that there's a lot of moving parts in this industry, and I'm here to help to provide my objective take on the situation at hand. So for just $30 usually, you could get those services. However, I'm doing there's a sale going on, Christmas in July. For just $120, you'll get access to that content for all the Fight Island UFC events for the month of July. So that's a 20% discount relative to the normal rate. And so that's there. You could access that on my website, ajsactionpacksportsbets.com, the subscription tab. It's also in the bio of my Twitter, Instagram profile. It also can be found in MMA Odds Breaker if that's easier for you as well. So that's basically what I got going. Obviously this is free content. Glad to be doing this with Steve. We did this DraftKings wise. We did the preview earlier in the week, which worked out great as well. But we're just here to provide you guys some helpful insight, because we realize that not everybody's willing to pay some money to get some services. So this is just kind of some brief, concise thoughts on our take, DraftKings for UFC 251. I hope you guys found this useful here.
Yeah, that was a hell of an outro too, by the way. So good luck. Support AJ. You can see my Twitter handle at that point, Jersey Boys MMA Media. Go there. You'll have fight clips. You'll have clips of everything, and promoting our stuff. So thanks and good luck to everybody.
Good luck, guys.